All right, if you're visiting with us tonight, well, you're going to see that the class is just a little differently than what we would normally have. And that is, we're going to be throwing it open to a lot of discussion that people have, everything that people would want to get off their chest or talk about. Why, we'll not put any bars out there, but we'll let you go ahead and talk about it. We're dealing in Romans, the 14th chapter. And I'm not going to go back and review over these things with the exception of, let's put it this way. In Romans, the 14th chapter, we're dealing with the differences between the strong and the weak. And we pointed out that the strong are those who understand that God has given us freedoms to do things, like eating of meats and keeping days as the examples that he gave. The weak are the people who say, no, you are not permitted to do that. Now, the weak have good intentions. They have good reasons for believing what they believe. But the problem is that God has not legislated on it, and so the strong then says that you can have those particular things. Now, we pointed out that the way the words strong and weak are used in the Roman letter in the 14th chapter is dealing with the strong says we have the latitude. We can do it if we want to. The weak says, no, you can't. Mitchell asked a good question, and he said, is there ever a case of where you can turn around and think that the weak might be right? I pointed out that you can't tell whether the person is strong or weak. That doesn't mean that they are right in there. And I've searched my mind, only came up with one thing that I can think about, and it would be this. In Romans the 15th chapter, we're told not to eat blood. Now, there are several of our brethren. The vast majority of our brethren say, no, you can't eat blood. But there are several very well-educated and notable men that said, no, I think that you can't eat blood. I think that that was just an expediency that he gave to those people at that time, and we think that you can eat it. Now, I happen to be one who thinks that you can't eat blood. So now, by the definition that I've given you with strong and weak, where does that put me on that scale of saying, no, you can't eat it? That would put me on the weak side, wouldn't it? Now, in this particular case, I believe that I'm right. I think that that is what the Bible teaches. In Genesis, the 9th chapter, can't eat blood. Book of Leviticus, can't eat blood. New Testament says, can't eat blood. I don't see the leeway of having it called an expediency there. Now, if that be true, then really that's the only example that I can think of where you would say, okay, the weak is doctrinally right and the strong would be doctrinally wrong. Of course, the other side would say just exactly the opposite. But let's put it this way, that we know that at least 99% of the time, 99 point several figures, is where the strong are those who know what the Bible teaches on the subject, and they know that there is a latitude in things that you can do. And the weak are those who think that you can't do certain things. So eating a meat and this then falls in that category. So now then tonight, we'll talk about various things. I mentioned some things that we'll throw out, and that is, I think, a good example as we look at this would be the drinking of wine. I primed you in telling you that I don't think that we should drink wine in this particular age. Now, does the Bible teach it is a sin to drink wine? If there's anything the Bible teaches, it teaches, no, those people drank wine back there. Jesus created wine. And so if somebody says, no, you can't drink wine, then you'd be teaching a false doctrine. So then you say, well, why is it that I would say that I do not drink it? I do not think that a real mature Christian should drink it in this particular age. Now, there are several reasons that I would give for that. Number one, the wine that we have today is not really the same kind of wine they had back there. Now, I realize wine is wine. It's made out of the skin of grapes and so forth. But the wine that they had back there was where they would press out the grape. They would leave it maybe 1 day, 2 days, whatever they want to do. And then they had ways of stopping the fermentation. And one of them was burying it in the ground, and so they'd stop it, and they'd pull it out, and they had what we would call grape juice, but it was called wine. They didn't talk about grape juice, they talked about wine. Now, excuse me, another thing that they did in the normal commerce of things was that they would dilute their wine with water. You go back to historical statements of Socrates and some of those guys, they argued about what is the best wine, whether it's diluted or how much you dilute it with and so forth. And so I've read of where they diluted it with as much as 30 parts water with 1 part wine, and a lot of times it was 20 parts with 1 part, and of course they dilute it with different amounts. But if you could conceive of taking a bottle of wine and putting it in a vat, and then taking 20 bottles of water, putting it in there and mixing it up, and then drinking that drink, how strong would that alcoholic beverage be? Do you see what I'm talking about? Now, this is the kind of things that they did, and children drank it, everybody drank it, but it was all called wine. Now, the Bible doesn't set any specific content that you can have along that line, but today, when we talk about drinking wine, what do you think about? If I told you I had a glass of wine last night, what do you think about? What is the percentage of alcohol? What am I talking about? Am I talking about taking a little wine, putting it in a glass, and then putting 20 parts water in it, or 5 parts water? And you say, no, it's a full amount. You see that you would have. So it's not exactly the same thing that we have today in there. And in that culture, the drinking of wine was a common, ordinary thing. Everybody did it. In this culture, it's not true. We don't need it for our water, and it's not true over here. So there are different cultures of the world that drink wine. I'm only talking about American culture. I'm talking about it over here. And so the influence, I know that the influence that we'd have if you saw me taking a bottle of wine out of the grocery store, because I've heard people talk about it. They see somebody and they, wow, you see they did this and they did that. So I know the excitement that it causes in there and how people think about it. The conservative religions in America today frown upon it. However, it's getting more so, flipping around on the other side of the scale today. But all I'm saying is that it's not the same as it was in that country that was over there. When you think about wine and you think about the alcoholism and the various things that come from it, we could all tell all kind of stories that had to do with that. But the way it is viewed in America is, among religious people, at least, it is not the same as it was over there. So the influence reason would be there. Now, you say, could I say drinking wine is wrong? No, can't say that. So you say, should you drink wine? No, I don't think in this culture, I don't think it is a wise thing to do. If you do, you're probably going to get in trouble. Over many years of preaching, my experience is that people who have taken the other viewpoint and engage in it somewhere along the line, violate it, drink too much, and some bad things happen. But that is a personal opinion that I would put out in there. Now, throw it out. Anybody want to say anything else on that? We've got several things we want to talk about.
They did have a restriction. I don't remember the passages where in the Old Testament where it wasn't supposed to be the dark stuff or the bubbly stuff. And another thing is, in our culture, we're driving 60 to 100 miles an hour down the freeway, and with a car 2 inches a couple of feet away, other cars on either side of us. So they didn't do that back then.
Okay, those would be things you could throw out just in addition to that. Anything else? I'm going to take several things and throw down here. Okay, he brought up smoking. is smoking a sin? Now, they didn't have cigarettes back in those days. They didn't smoke. Nowhere in the Bible does it say smoking is a sin. So you can't say really it is a sin. Now, today, in our culture, we have to step back and we have to look at it and we have to say, okay, what about smoking? Now, how is smoking looked on today? Not 10 years ago, not 20 years ago, but how's it looked on today in our culture? You notice them and you look at it, that's not a very wholesome thing. It's kind of interesting, and he brought out this point here, that that several years ago, that you walk outside in between class and service, and you would find the men standing out in the front yard smoking. Now, I well remember when I was a boy, and this goes on up to where I became a man, when I first started preaching for the first few years, as soon as class is over, all the men head out to the front porch and stand out there and have their cigarette. Now, that's the reason, really, we have 15 minutes between class and worship, if you want to know the truth about it. That is the reason. Now, some churches still have it. And what we've done, we say, you don't need that 15 minutes if you're not going out and get a smoke. Let's just go out of class, let's come on in here, and let's start with our worship. Today, you don't see it out there. It's not part of the culture. But still, today, a lot of times, why churches still have that 15 minutes between. So just mark it down. That really started for the smokers. Now, nobody really thought anything bad about it. They kind of looked on it a little bit, but it wasn't really bad. Then about, I'd say 40 years ago, when the problems came out with cigarettes, the brethren started really arguing about it, and some would say it is a sin. And it is a sin, and then they would bring out that you lose your self-control. It's addictive, you use self-control, it's not good for your health, and such as this. Now, losing self-control is wrong, but the act of smoking itself is really not dealt with in the Bible at all. And so you have to say, okay, what about then the smoking? How would we look on it? What would we have to say about it, really, in today's culture? Suppose a couple guys goes out on the front porch and starts smoking Sunday morning between class and services. Will anybody notice it? People drive by, will they notice it? Yeah. The influence is bad. But now, about 40 years ago, then started arguing. One side, it's a sin. The other side, no, it's not. I know of one brother, elder in the church in California, that he wanted to debate this all over the country. And he came up in this area, and he was wanting to debate it. And his problem was that if you really want to be a good Christian, you ought to smoke. And those of you who don't smoke need to take it up, because it helps you convert people. He said, when I go in somebody's house, I sit down, I pull out a cigarette, and I smoke, offer them one, and they know that I'm just a regular guy, and you go in, you don't smoke, well, you put the pressure on them. They don't listen to you like they listen to me. So his argument was, smoking is the thing that you ought to do. Well, we know in the last 40 years, why these things now have turned around, they've changed around in here. I had a guy one time come to me about beer and wine in the same way. And he was saying, you can't tell me it's wrong to drink a bottle of beer. No, really can't, but don't think you should, because you're going to get in trouble if you do. You just watch, because it's not an admirable thing among people that really is trying to serve the Lord and trying to live a life of good influence. No, sir. Well, the interesting thing is, he moved. And then, right after he moved, why, I had a class with this guy. His wife came and had a class and said, so-and-so has been studying the Bible with my husband, but he'd like to have another Bible study. So I went down, I sat down, and started studying with him. One of the first questions he asked me was, you want a beer? No, I don't drink. Well, I've been studying with so-and-so, and he does. I mean, he comes over and he sits here and he'll drink beer with me and we'll study the Bible. And well, if that's what you want, it won't happen with me. And so you won't take one. No. So I said, boy, he said, that is a relief to me. He said, because I knew that I wasn't paying any attention to what that guy said because I knew he was a hypocrite. So I said, if you want to study, I'll study with you. And it just kind of gives you an illustration, an idea of really what influence does along those lines. Okay, throw it out. Any comments? Yeah. To inflict bodily harm upon yourself and hurt yourself and try to take your life, I don't think it's right. I think you need to protect your body. But again, you come to this, glorify God with your body. You were bought with a price. Glorify God with your body. Again, you come in to this argument, okay, what are you doing? What kind of foods are you eating that's not good for you? Okay? In other words, are you getting too much fat? Are you getting too much carbohydrates? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And everybody is over here, you need to be a vegetarian, you need to do this, you need to do that. And so I can't answer those questions, see? And yeah, I think that we need to keep our body, but you say to what extent, I don't know. I can't draw those lines.
So the point that was made on Sunday was that if smoking was a sin, it's always been a sin, and if it's not a sin, then it's never been a sin. It's like, well, we found out that drinking NutraSweet killed us and caused our children to have, I don't know, whatever horrible diseases. We'd all say, well, we shouldn't do that because it hurts our children.
Yeah.
But today, I don't know that, so am I doing something wrong?
Okay, let's make a distinction now on what we're talking about. Good question. Let's make this distinction. Now, when I try to make this distinction, one or two people get it, but the rest don't. And afterwards, they'll say, I don't see why you say this or why you say that in there. I started out one time teaching a class and said, now let me tell you this. I do not believe drinking wine or whiskey or bourbon or smoking pot or taking cocaine is a sin. So let's just get that straight right now. Now let me tell you why I think you should not do any of those things. See? Why you should not do them. Now there are other ramifications to it. Let's go back to smoking. There are other ramifications. The act of smoking itself is not wrong. The things that it will cause, as you find out, then might come in to the point of where, okay, you lose control and you're committing suicide. Okay? So is it right to commit suicide? No, it's not right to commit suicide. See? But that act itself is not wrong. You got to look at the act itself, see, which is not wrong. Now, I don't believe that you should do any of those things, see, so don't get me wrong. But the act itself is not wrong. There's a difference in the act and in the various things that happen when you do those things, see, when you do them. For instance, let's turn it around. Suppose you go to the doctor tomorrow and you find that you have some problem. And this is happening, of course, across the land. And so the doctor says, you need to smoke a marijuana cigarette each day, and it will help you with your problem. Now, would it be wrong to do that? See? Would it be wrong to do it? No, I don't think it would. I don't think it's wrong to smoke the marijuana cigarette. Now, am I advocating even smoking one marijuana cigarette? You see that under these other conditions? No, absolutely not, because of all the side effects that come from this thing. But the act itself is not wrong. Let me illustrate it in this way. Suppose that you go to the doctor. He said, okay, you have this disease. Now you need to take one small glass of whiskey in here, just a small shot of whiskey, and you need to smoke a marijuana cigarette every day, and if you do, it'll cure you of your disease and you'll live 20 years longer. Now, should you try to get cured of your disease and live 20 years longer? Now, would you do that? I would. I would. Now, let's suppose that another doctor comes in and says, Lowell, you don't have to do that. There is another cure for your disease. If you will just be unfaithful to your wife, you'll commit adultery twice this year, it'll cure your disease. And I guess if you want to joke, it would cure me. I wouldn't have it at the end of the year. But all joking aside, what would I have to say? No, I can't do that. Well, it will cure you. We see that doesn't make any difference. Another doctor comes in and says, okay, Lowell, that's stupid. You don't have to commit adultery. I tell you what you do. We found out that you can have the same effect if you will just shoot one person. Just kill one person. We don't know why yet, but the emotional trauma and everything goes through it, kills all those germs, and you're healed. What would you have to say? No, I can't commit murder. I can't commit adultery. I can smoke that cigarette. What's the difference? See? We see the difference. We're talking about the act of adultery is a sinful thing. The act of murder is a sinful thing. The act of smoking a cigarette is not a sinful thing. It's dumb. It's foolish. It's ignorant. It'll get you in all kind of trouble. You will become addicted. When you become addicted, all kind of other side effects is going to be there. Don't ever take one puff of a cigarette. But is it a sin? See? And so, this is what I'm trying to make, the distinction of the act itself and what will happen. It's very important to do that.
So what part of the act of me shooting you is the sin? Is it loading the gun?
I don't.
Seriously, it sounds like situation ethics. It's like our Supreme Court just said that if you didn't mean to kill him, you can't be charged with murder. And it sounds like, to me, the act of murder is wrong. Yeah, but what part?
Okay, let me give it to you again. The doctor says, Lowell, kill one person, and the exhilaration you'll get will be something. Ah, Mitch. Now, hold it. Next Wednesday night, I'm going to hold it. You're through talking. You're dead man. Now, next Wednesday night, I'm going to get you. So next Wednesday night, we come in, I pull out a gun and I shoot Mitch. When did I sin? Okay, I sin right now, right? When I'm making this decision, see, I'm going to do this. When my thoughts were sinful, my plans were sinful, my act was sinful. I think murder is in that whole thing, see. I think if I had a gun and the gun goes off and kills you, I haven't committed murder.
If any of the acts that you do aren't inherently sinful, but the culmination of those acts results in a sin, then somewhere along there, one of those acts, something has to be sinful. Because you're saying, oh, well, one puff of a cigarette's not bad, but if you take a lot of puffs of a cigarette, then it gets to the point that it is bad.
No, 10 million puffs of a cigarette is not sinning. 100 million puffs of a cigarette is not sinning. Now, what it does for you brings in a lot of stuff. See? Brings in a lot of stuff. You've got to make the distinction between the act and the results and what it does, the side effects. Murder, I commit sin as I first start. She's first, John. Claire? What's that? Okay, lack of self-control is sinful. Now, Lack of self-control is sinful. Can you give me a scripture for that? If you can't, I'll give it to you. Okay, in 2 Peter chapter 1, starting with verse 5, yeah, lack of self-control is sinful. Now, what is sinful? What is sin? I realize I'm nitpicking, but I want to nitpick because I want you to see this. What is sinful? It's lack of self-control. It's lack of self-control. It's not the puffing on the cigarette, see? Now, I realize when you start puffing on it, you do it enough, then you're going to have your lack of self-control. Then you've committed a sin. But do you see the difference I'm talking about? That if you take 3 puffs of smoke tonight and you don't become addicted, you haven't sinned. You haven't sinned. But lack of self-control is sin. John? Speak up now.
I said great minds think alike. I was just going to say just about the same thing.
She's smarter than you are. Yeah, okay.
I see a relation there between the question of lying and smoking, because they're both tied right into the question of self-control. Where the glass of wine with the meal, or puffing, taking a cigarette when the doctor tells you to, is one thing, but when you lose that self-control and you start pulling in a whole bunch more and you can't control it, you won't control it. It becomes, that's the point where, a point, which becomes sin.
Yeah, it's going to be a sinful. So I'm just trying to make a distinction between just the act itself and that.
Well, could you call it sinful for the knowledge that you know of the consequences of which what you do is going to cause harm? Wouldn't that consider it a sin? Because you have the knowledge that what you're doing is going to cause you harm. You're not allowed to harm your body because it's not yours to do so. You know it and you continue to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Isn't that considered a sin?
Okay, I think everybody hear what she had to say? This is another ramification of it. This is the reason I knew we'd have a long class tonight. We're not going to stop till we get through here, so it's going to be 2 o'clock before we leave tonight. Just kidding. If you know that it's going to cause problems, and you say, I'm going to do it anyway, knowing that you are getting ready to put yourself in a situation where you're sinful, isn't that a sin? Yeah, I think it is. See, I think it is. But now, that is different than just the puffing. See, let's suppose
When you puff,
what.
with all the knowledge that's out there, you know when you take that puff that you are harming your body and that it gives everybody else the image that it's cool. But so they're actually helping them harm their body.
Okay, now most people do, but let's go back to this. Let's take a 11-year-old kid. He finds one of his dad's cigarettes out there somewhere, and he wonders what it tastes like. He lights it up and he takes a smoke, and he takes it in and blows it out. Has he sinned? Okay. He hadn't sinned. Now, if somebody says, I know that smoking will cause all these kind of problems, and I will end up with doing things that I shouldn't be doing, but I'm going to do it anyway. See, I'm going to do it anyway. What was it we learned last week? Whatsoever is not of faith is sin. When I do something that I do not believe is right, that is sin. So what you're dealing with, see, you're bringing up the thought before the act, and yeah, that would be sin. But we can carry that really to something else. Suppose there's something that's good for you. Castor oil. It's good for you. But you believe it's bad. Let's suppose that you believe it's bad. And you believe if I take some of this castor oil, it's going to cause me a lot of harm. And so you force the castor oil on you. You don't like it, but you force it on you. Have you sinned? Yeah. You've sinned. Even eating an egg. If you believe that it will cause you damage, that is, if it will harm you, if it's a sin, and you eat it, what happens to you? See? It's a sin. So yeah, that thought, that's the thing I'm trying to distinguish right now. I'm trying to throw that thing away, trying to throw that thought away, and get to the act. See? And get to the act.
Well, I like Rocky Road ice cream, but I'm not gonna go out in the middle of the night looking for a store and buy it in a thunderstorm. Whereas if I'm addicted to smoking, I'm gonna hit every store I can find when I'm out of
Yep.
cigarettes. Now, does that put it in a different realm?
That's self-control. That's self-control. So that now, yeah. So now you're back to something else. See, and so if you do that, start doing that on your Rocky Road, and there are people that do it for Rocky Road. See, then you've got exactly the same problem. See, then you've got exactly the same problem. I'm just trying to nitpick to make the distinction between the act itself and the thoughts and all the other ramifications that are around it. And I think it'll help when we see that.
The 11-year-old kid, if they picked up a gun and deliberately shot somebody, we would all be appalled. We wouldn't be appalled that it taken a puff on cigarette.
Right. Okay. Let's try modesty. Should we dress modest? Yeah, Bible says dress modestly. See? Bible says it. What is modesty? What is it? I'll start around the women. I'm going to have you all to stand up tonight, and we'll have a vote on whether you're dressed modestly tonight. That's it. What is modest? If you want me to answer your questions, I mean, if you want me to talk, you got to talk up to me. It's my ears. It's not you, but that's the reason I keep saying what. I was down talking to a lady today about some hearing aids, and we'll do this. But okay, somebody hand. Okay.
I would say not exposing your private parts of your body in excess.
Not exposing private parts. Okay. Let's get anybody else except Jeannie and I. We're having a class all by ourselves.
Not drawing attention to the way you're dressed. I mean,
Okay, not drawing attention to the way you're dressed. Now,
there are times when it's appropriate to not have any clothes on. In a doctor's office or in other situations. So it's not just what you do or do not have on. It's is it appropriate for the situation.
but that's the question I ask you. What is appropriate for the situation?
Modesty is wearing enough clothing that you do not attract, get someone from the opposite sex to look at you in such a way that is sinful.
Okay, Mitch has brought sex into it now. Is there any sexual thing involved in modesty? In other words, can you women dress in such a way that you know you're going to start turning the heads of men? Or are you all so naive that you think it doesn't make any difference what you do? You see? No. You know that you can dress in such a way that it's going to cause the attention to be drawn to you in a sexual way. Now, when that happens, that's immodest. But is there immodesty other than in the sexual realm? I think Donna made a mistake tonight and gave us a good answer. She said it's not drawing undue attention to yourself. And now we're starting to kind of hit the nail on the head. When the women of the New Testament were told to dress modestly, what is it they were told not to do, not to wear? Don't dress this way. Short skirts? Braided hair and golden rings. There now, we're starting to get in there, in that realm. What's wrong with, as history tells us, women of wealth would have their hair put up in a twirl, and then they would braid gold all the way through it so that it would shine in there, put on a lot of jewelry. Would that cause attention? If somebody came in here tonight, some lady came in tonight and was dressed like that, it would draw that undue attention toward them. That's immodest. So immodesty comes with overdressing and underdressing. Now, are there appropriate type of clothing to wear when you, let's say you go to church services? Would there be a difference in the difference if you're going out on a picnic to play soccer and you're coming to services this next Sunday morning? If you were going to go meet the president, suppose he was coming to town and you were given the honor to come and stand in line and go up and shake hands with him, would there be any appropriate attire that you might think would be better to wear than other? See?
I draw a distinction between modesty and appropriate attire. Because I believe I can be modest, but be totally inappropriate for a situation. And I don't see the whole I don't see that those terms are necessarily the same thing.
Well, okay, you're looking more at modesty in the sexual realm.
Being fully clothed.
Yeah, well, in the sexual realm is what you're looking at. Suppose that I'm thinking of a young girl right now that when we converted her, Jim Link had been studying with her, and so she said, okay, I want to go study with Lowell. And she wanted to be a lady evangelist. And she wasn't going to let Jim baptize her until he told her she could be an evangelist. No, you can't. So Jim, he wasn't very old in the faith that way, and so they came up to talk with me. And I'll never forget when she walked in. These are days in the hippie days. Now, you may not remember those days, or you may be too young to remember those days. But she came in with old brogans on, that is loggers' boots, you know, that's up there, Levi's, an old shirt that's hanging down, and she came stomping in my office. I mean, it came walking in there stomping. And by the way, she did this in services too afterwards. I mean, it wasn't just in there, but that's the way it was the first time that I met her. You probably know who I'm talking about. You're shaking your head in there. Deb Gerke is who it is. And she would come to services in these old logging boots and these old things. And then finally somebody told her, said, you might want to dress up just a little bit to come to church. So she went down to the Goodwill and bought some skirts that go all the way to the floor. See? And this is, of course, what the hippies were wearing. This was a great thing for the hippies at that time because women didn't wear those clothing then. They wore the shorter dresses, and hippies did exactly the opposite. And so she would come in. Well, whenever Deb came into that assembly, all eyes would go to her. There wasn't a man there that looked at her in a sexual way. But all eyes would go to her. She drew all attention. I think that's immodest. That's what we're getting about immodest. And so, inappropriate immodesty, there's a distinction, I understand, but not much. Yeah.
It'd be like if Tony wanted to wear his Elvis suit to church.
What's that?
Tony wanted to wear his Elvis suit to church.
Yeah, oh yeah, okay, there's a good one. Tony wearing his Elvis suit to church. He wore it out to the picnic here the other night, but let's suppose he walks in Sunday morning with his Elvis suit on. I think that he's immodest because that's going to draw attention to everyone. So men and women both can live in that particular realm, but there's a place for shorts and a place you shouldn't wear shorts. They're just appropriate attire that we should wear under certain circumstances, and we need to look around and say, okay, what is it? How is the attire that most people wear in the culture in which you're in? See? Now,
I once had somebody tell me, and I really respect this person, that modesty was more an attitude of respect, an attitude of meekness in whatever you do and however you dress. So,
well, that's a good point. That goes back to the attitude behind it of trying to show respect in what you're doing which is appropriate for the occasion that's there. TV. TV, good or bad? TV and movies, I guess, would all fall in the same situation. As you look at that, there are people who say you should not have a TV in your house. Now, there are probably people who have been looking at the wrong shows, and it's got them into a lot of trouble. Has TV gotten a lot of people into a lot of trouble and led them off sexually and led them off into pornography and so forth? Yeah, you bet your life it has. And so there's a lot of bad things that's happened for the misuse of it that's there. And the same thing is true about the movies. See? Same thing is true about the movies. Now, can you go to a movie? Let me tell you a little bit about the way things have evolved. Back, let's say in 1952, in between class, all the men would go out, except just one or two odd individuals, and have a cigarette out on the church lawn. So the lawn would be full of cigarette butts. And at that same time, they were preaching against movies. I mean, that was almost every sermon about the evils of movies and so forth. Well, I was raised in a culture where I never went to a movie. All my life I had gone to maybe 3 Lone Ranger movies when I was just a little kid. But I'd never gone to a movie. And I remember Doris and I got married. Boy, here it is, all this preaching. It came down on movies and what all went on and how horrible it was and how the women dressed and all of this kind of stuff. And it was just death. That no Christian should go to a movie, and if you did, you need to come up and make a confession before the church. It was so bad that when we lived in this little town of about 5,000 people, they had one theater there down on Main Street, but when we walked down around that block, we wouldn't even walk down the side of the street that the theater was on. Even if we wanted to get to the store here, we'd walk across the street, down this way, and then back over to get to the hardware store or whatever it was, because we didn't want to be seen out in front of this cesspool, you see, that was out there. And that's how hard, really, it was. It's a sin to go into a movie theater. Now, keep in mind what I'm telling you. It's a sin to go into a movie theater. Now, is it a sin to go into a movie theater? No, it's not a sin to go into a movie theater. Now, when you go into a movie theater and you're indiscriminate, how many times do you go in and you hear and see things that you shouldn't be seeing and hearing? Quite a lot of times, they tell me. They tell me. Now, again, Helen and I have tried a couple of movies. We'll try to catch up with the culture. Some people have said, Lowell, you don't go to movies? No, don't go to movies. Well, how do you know what's going on in the world? Well, if that's what's going on in the world, I don't know what's going on in the world. I just deal kind of with real things out here instead of the things that is put on in there in the make-believe world that's there. So one time we were down at Redmond. I said, let's go to a movie. I've seen this on TV. It's a real clean movie and so forth. And so I probably tell you, Will Smith? Is there a Will Smith? Yeah. Okay. He was the leader in that. See? Real clean movie. See? Now we're getting some giggles because some people know about him. So we go in there and sit down, and so he starts out cussing. Next sentence he's cussing. Next sentence he's cussing. Next he's cussing. I look at her. She looks at me. Well, people have said that they always throw in a few cuss words so they can get a R rating. So let's look here just a minute. More cussing, more cussing. We got up and walked out and lost our $7, whatever it was that cost us. We tried another movie, same way. People give us movies. And here it is, the cussing goes on. Now, is it wrong for me to say, I don't want to be a part of that culture? I don't want to put that in my mind. I don't want to see these thoughts, and I don't want to hear these words that I'll be thinking about in there. No. But now, are there good movies? See, this is the point. Are there good movies? People tell me they are. Now, I have been to see Dancing with the Wolves. You know, I'd go see that. And there was another wolf story I went to. I've seen the 10 Commandments. I've seen just about everything that's out there.
I know a movie you can see. There's no cuss words at all. Snow dogs.
Snow dogs? Write that down, Helen. We'll give it a try. Snow dogs. Okay, my whole point is this. Are there a lot of reasons why we would say, stay away from those things? Yeah, see? Yeah. But now, can we bind it? See, that's the point. Can we bind the act? Now let me tell you. Suppose I see Raleigh. He goes in this movie and he's in there, and I see him come out of that movie, and it's up there, and I don't know anything about it. I ask somebody, and they say, oh, that's a raunchy movie. Another time I see him go in, he comes back out. What kind of movie was that? Oh, that's a horrible movie. What am I beginning to pick up about Raleigh? And as this goes on and goes on, what am I going to be knowing about Raleigh? What's he filling his mind with? Let's see. Oh, yeah, he just went in to buy popcorn, he said. You see, sure, yeah. Yeah, that's like me drinking a Coke in a tavern. You know, yeah. Are you beginning to see what I'm talking about the act and about the making of the law and binding the law? And Scott made a good point when he's talking about the boundary lines, and where God put the stake, you leave the stake. Don't move it out. Don't pull it in. You leave the stake. Now, if you want to make sure that you don't infringe and do something wrong, pull your life back in. If you're going around a mountain road, and there's a big cliff here, you're going around that road, you're driving there, which side of the road do you need to stay on? I knew somebody would say the inside. No. Stay on the outside. The cliff's over here. 60 miles an hour, you're going around. Stay on the outside. All you got to do is stay on the outside lane. If you stay in the outside lane, you're just as safe as if you're on the inside lane. Isn't that right?
A little safer when the truck's coming.
Yeah, okay, a little safer if the truck comes. Now, what's the danger? What's the whole point that I'm getting at? If you're on the outside lane going around 60 miles an hour, what's your chances of going off? Pretty good. If you're on the inside lane, there's a whole lot more security that's in there. So I would suggest that if you're going to be going around these mountains at 60 miles an hour, drive on the inside lane. Take a chance with the trucks, see? Because I know pretty well what's going to happen if you're going around on the right on the edge of this cliff, see, that you're going to skip off. So back up. Don't get caught up in sin. Don't get caught up in doing these things that are wrong. But keep in mind, there's a difference between this. Well, there's some other things, 2 or 3 things here that need to. By the way, I was going to talk about conscience tonight. A couple of people said we're not sure whether they understood me about your conscience and your guide and so forth, but our time is up. And so we're going to stop right here. So I got myself a note written here, which didn't help tonight. So if I start out next week and don't talk about conscience and get that straightened out, well, hold up your hand and we'll go. So we'll start out next week here where we left off, and then we'll go ahead and in the book. Okay, class dismissed.